Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 4th Kent County Planning Commission meeting. I'll take a roll call. Ray Strong. Aye. Paul Ruge.
Here.
Bill Crowding. Here. Bill Sutton. Here. Paula Reeder.
Here.
And I'm here, of course. And Jim Saunders sent an email, I think, to staff that he was not coming due to illness. We have our April 6th minutes in front of us. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I have one observation to make about the minutes. In reading over them, I think the discussion of the dialogue that occurred relating to the proposed text amendment is unnecessarily abbreviated and misses a lot of important points that were raised in the conversation that occurred at the last meeting. And what I would suggest in lieu of rewriting the minutes is to put a reference in the minutes for readers that directs them to the recorded transcript of the meeting for a full discussion or full illumination of the complete discussion. I raised a number of points that aren't recorded here in the minutes. I think there were several other people who did as well. So I know you're not supposed to write a complete transcript, but I think this one was unnecessarily abbreviated.
Did you have any specific correction to the minutes, or that's your general comment?
Well, it would take too much time to go through every bit. So I'm suggesting that in lieu of that, that we actually, within the minutes, refer readers to the recorded transcript for a complete reporting of what occurred in the meeting.
I think the best way to handle that is to take Ms. Reeder's comment under advisement, and we can discuss it as a commission as a whole, perhaps in a closed session.
Okay,
Okay.
Thank you.
that's fine, thank you.
I had one change,
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
and that was on page 3, I think it was, regarding Mr. Sutton's vote. Just to clarify that he had not recused himself, he abstained.
Right. Yep.
It's on page 4.
Yep. Got it. Any other corrections? I'll take a motion with that correction. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Ray?
Aye.
Paul Ruge?
Aye.
Bill Crowding? Bill Sutton? Paul Reeder?
Nay.
And I'll vote with the affirmative. Aye. Thank you. Our first application today is the application of Gillespie Precast LLC, Brickyard Handlings LLC, and they're requesting final major site plan approval for their application in the 4th election district, and this is a planning commission decision. Thank you, Mark. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Last month, this applicant came before the board with concept and preliminary plan, which is approved with some conditions, and now is before it for final site plan approval, on which we have some conditions to propose as well. What they're hoping to do is to do an expansion, 6.22 acres, finished product storage yard, and to construct a 16,000 square foot storage building, and to construct a new entrance onto Maryland Route 291 Morganac Road. In regards to the additions to the plans previously submitted, one of the components we looked at was the stormwater management plan, still under review. My understanding is that they should have a response and some clarification on those designs within a few weeks. My understanding is that they've been in communication with SHA in regards to the application for the second entrance, the entrance onto Morganac Road, and that should be resolved within the next few weeks. We did do a site visit to look at the landscape in front of the proposed submerged wetlands portion. There was a 2018 landscape plan which was approved for the expansion of the building on that particular site. In looking at the site, there are some pieces missing, and in terms of the proposed entrance, there would be some of those, some of that vegetation which was presented on that plan is to be removed or moved or relocated. So in regards to this application, we are making some recommendations in regards to landscaping. In regards to the requirements for the site plan review, we do have these following comments. The proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The proposal does conform with the provisions of applicable rules and regulations. The areas for vehicular flow appear to be adequate for the use proposed. The demands of public services and infrastructure are reasonable. The standard waste from the office is discharged in Chestertown sewage system, so no sewage or refuse disposal is proposed for this project. And protection of surface and groundwater from pollution is proposed through the stormwater management plan. Except for the removal, disturbance of road frontage landscaping for the proposed access and proposed submerged gravel wetlands, no other vegetation is proposed to be removed. Citizen participation report had been submitted, and there was no opposition proposed for development of this project. Our recommendations are as follows. Excuse me. Submission of all required sureties for stormwater management, sediment and erosion control, and landscaping. Approval of the stormwater and sediment and erosion control plans. MDOT SHA approval for the proposed access, and an updated landscaping plan to be submitted and approved by the department before approval. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are the applicants or the representatives here? Please step forward. Can you raise your right hands? And do you testify that, do you affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay, you state your name and address for the record, please.
Kevin Sharon, DMS Associates, business address is P.O. Box 80, Centerville, Maryland. Cameron Gillespie with Gillespie Precast, P.O. Box 450, Chestertown, Maryland.
Thank you. What can you tell us about this application?
So, as Mr. Carper said, we were before you last month for preliminary approval. Nothing on the plans have changed substantially with the exception of additional engineering and details. We have verbal commitment or verbal approval for the sediment erosion control. We've worked with the county's reviewer for stormwater management, and the primary stormwater device up by the road is essentially approved. They wanted us to get a geotech engineer involved, so we've done borings and confirmed that the soils are suitable for that type of stormwater device. The one in the back, we're still working with them. We're proposing to use something that Gillespie casts. You probably see them in the yard. It's the large arches. It's not a Tier 1 MDE approved sediment control device because it's structural, but they'd like to use it as kind of a demonstration structure. It is a sand filter. It meets the Maryland stormwater requirements, but like I said, it's a Tier 2. So we're working through that, but request that we get a conditional approval from the Planning Commission on that. And if any of that changes, we would come back to show you what the revised plan looks like. State Highway has commented on the entrance. We responded to their initial letter. Nothing in the letter indicated that they were opposed to it at all. It was basically just technical comments. So with that, we request a conditional final approval for the Gillespie Brickyard expansion. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Does anyone on the commission have questions for the applicant or staff or comments?
I just had one on that. What takes the highway so long? This thing, they've got to have had it at least 90 days.
Well, they take at least 30 days every time we submit. So according to the website, the review letter or this round of review is supposed to be completed by May 15th. So we'll get that second letter by then.
Just for staff, an updated landscaping plan is submitted to and approved by we don't have a landscaping plan?
So, sorry, go ahead. We do have
2018 plan was when the yard that's out there now is approved. And so that landscaping was installed. What's missing, all of the junipers, all of the trees were planted. The small spireas that will only grow to 2 or 4 feet is really more ornamental. Those are missing, so we'll go back and put those in, but it's not really gonna, it's not gonna really affect the buffering. It'll just be more of a aesthetic. But all of the trees were there, and as Mr. Carver said, the 4 that come out for the proposed entrance, we'll replant those somewhere in that buffer.
Okay, thank you. Comments from anyone else, questions? Does anyone in the audience wants to speak to this application, or do we have people online, Campbell? Or how do we see if they are? Oh. I'll start there. Is there anyone online that would like to speak to this application? Hearing none. Anyone in the audience wish to speak to this application? Okay, I summarize anything different?
Just request your conditional approval, and we'll work with staff to get the other approvals in line.
Okay, thank you. It's up here, back here for a decision. What's everyone think about the application?
I move that the commission grant approval to this request, subject to Gillespie's submission of all required sureties for stormwater management, sediment and erosion control, and landscaping, approval of the stormwater and sediment and erosion control plans, final MDOT State Highway Administration approval for their proposed access design, and an updated landscaping plan satisfactory to the Planning Commission.
Just to clarify, it's conditioned on.
Conditional approval, yes.
We have a motion, have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I just have one question, is, you mentioned with the MDOT, it sounds like it was technical, but you said if it will come back if what happens?
Well, I was speaking more to the stormwater management
Okay.
back. If it winds up being visually different than what we're representing on the plan now, we'd leave it to staff, but we'd be willing to come back to the planning commission.
Okay.
to show you that.
Thank you. Anyone else have any items? I'll call for the vote. Paula Reeder?
Yay.
Bill Sutton? Yes. Bill Crowding? Paul Ruggie? Ray Strong? And I'll vote with the majority. So we've granted final site plan approval. Hope you get the nice landscaping out there for us.
Thank you for your time. Yeah.
It's fine. Our next application is the County Commissioners zoning text amendment of Height Industrials, and this is a recommendation to the County Commissioners.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if anyone intends to comment, please, we ask that you please sign up on the sign-in sheet, and we'll call you from there. So if you haven't signed up already. It's right on the table to the right of the door. Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have something that, we got a letter here from Kent County Economic Tourism Development Commission that are writing in favor of this. It says here that they had an April 12th meeting, was voted unanimously in support of the proposed text amendment. I'm just saying, we have a member on this board that is also a member of that board. And I think that if they were at that meeting, they should at least advise everyone that they were at that meeting and have voted with the, it says voted unanimously, so if they were there and they voted, then they're part of it and they voted already in approval of it.
Well, if I'm required to make that acknowledgement, I'm happy to do so. I was appointed by the commissioners to serve on both commissions, and I am not restricted in terms of my votes on the Economic Development Commission. This is a legislative text amendment. We're not talking about voting here today on a particular proposal where we're voting on a text amendment that has in fact been recommended and requested by our commissioners. So having made that disclosure, I feel that I should have the right here to also vote on this particular text amendment, and intend to do so.
I don't think anyone has addressed your ability to vote, just a request to disclose your participation at that
Well, it
committee
was,
meeting.
I think the request to disclose is questioning my standing here to vote. So I want to be sure that that's clear.
I'm not questioning your ability to vote, I'm questioning whether you need to disclose that to the public.
All right, I'm happy to do that. I think that's public knowledge already. But
I also have a disclosure about information I received, ex parte, that was not made available to the applicant or to the public. And to preface it, I'd hate to take too much time, but I want to read something out of our bylaws. When considering any matter, all parties need the assurance that other interested parties will not have an unfair advantage in presenting their version of relevant facts or concerns to the commission. To that end, commission members must avoid communicating with applicants or any other persons about a pending application, except at commission meetings when the applicant is considered. If a planning commission member receives unsolicited communications about a pending application outside of the planning commission meeting, that member must disclose and describe the communications at the earliest opportunity during the commission's consideration of that proposal. And that's what I'm going to disclose. I received an email April 7th, which was the day after our last meeting. It was addressed to Bill Crowding, James Saunders, me, Paul Ruge, William Sutton, Ray Strong, Cynthia McCann, Bill Mackey. Today, I received independent confirmation that the exterior height of Dixon Val's headquarters building on 213 is 53 feet. This information should give all who expressed concern yesterday about the visual impact of a 60-foot tall building a solid frame of reference. No complaints have been filed regarding the height of the Dixon Val building, which is clearly visible from the surrounding residential neighborhoods in 213, the main gateway to Chestertown. And that was from Paula Reeder. Same thing, I want to disclose that because we must. Okay, Bill, you ready for the,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
At your last meeting on April 6th, you all made some requests for additional information. That appears in a memo entitled Additional Materials. Those 4 areas were a map depicting the 301 corridor being proposed. So that map is attached. It's essentially the 1 mile corridor with a bump out to include the 6 commercial properties that we believe were always intended to be part of the Route 301 corridor. It's not defined in your code, so along with the changes to the proposed definition that you requested, we've also attached this map, which essentially shows what the description would say. You had requested images of 60-foot tall buildings. I'd like to thank the Upper Shore Regional Council's funding of what we sort of informally call a GIS Circuit Rider. That funding made available the response that you see to the Eastern Shore GIS Regional Cooperative. Carl reached out to some folks at Salisbury University, and they were able to use LiDAR, which is a high-tech way of measuring the heights of buildings. Those photographs from them appear in your additional materials packet. There's a description at the top of each picture of exactly what the height is and where that occurs. And finally, you had asked for some examples of possible landscaping. So I decided to try artificial intelligence out. So I asked DALL-E a bunch of questions. I used terms like 60-foot tall buildings, extremely tall buildings, all kinds of things to see what it might generate. And there were a lot of different images. Some made sense, some didn't. I picked some out that I felt would be theoretical ways that landscaping might look. So, and then finally, since this discussion was sort of about how much landscaping can, how effective is it, I provided you with a very simple diagram and some numbers about how high screening would need to be in order to
shield the building to 60 foot high at different distances. And those are just sort of chosen at regular intervals. I'm happy to answer questions. The original staff report is also attached along with correspondence that has been received since your last meeting. That correspondence is fairly lengthy. It's part of the packet published online. Since the packet was published, we've received 8 more pieces of correspondence along with the email that I sent you summarizing what Case Demoy had provided to me in his drawing. And happy to read those into the record. I know some of the folks who submitted them may be here, may want to read their own items into the record. You have them before you in printed form and you received them by email. So happy to take whatever direction you want to give.
Thank you, Bill. Do we want to read the letters in?
I mean, one option could be, are these going to be posted online, added to the packet?
They certainly can be.
That would be one option, would be to publish them online. If you felt like they were too much to read, you could query to see if anyone here wants to read their own letter. Anyone who submitted a letter. You could
Can we
summarize them.
Can we just
You could
run down
summarize
maybe?
them. Mhm. Identify them and summarize them.
I guess we have a letter from Joyce Morales, Planning Commission Chair of Millington. Is she here, or a representative from Millington? Okay, I think we could read that letter, or,
And I noticed that for some reason my mic wasn't working, so hopefully it's working now. Regarding the proposed zoning text amendment resolution 2023-02, dear Director Mackey, the Millington Planning Commission is aware of the proposed zoning text amendment to update the permitted height of industrial structures in certain zoning districts, especially along Route 301 corridor. We would like this to serve as notification that we are opposed to this amendment. The Community Volunteer Fire Company of Millington does not have the proper equipment for buildings of this height, nor do they have the proper facilities to house such a piece of apparatus. They are a volunteer company with limited resources and manpower. These restrictions could be detrimental to the structure as well as a safety issue with employees and staff. Sincerely, Joyce Price Morales, Millington Planning Commission Chair, signed electronically.
thank you. The next letter is from Marcia Fritz, and she CC'd Cynthia Saunders and Elizabeth Watson. Are any of them going to testify today? Will you testify today? Okay, can we, so you can read your own letter? Well, I'm just trying to expediency. Can you represent her own letter? Yes. Thank you. Community Volunteer Fire Company in Millington, is there anyone here for that? Here.
So the mic is not functioning properly.
I can read it if you want for that one. This is to the Kent County Planning Commission or Commission, to the Commission. It has been brought to our attention of a text amendment changing the height of buildings in Kent County to 60 feet. This is a great concern to the Community Volunteer Fire Company, as we do not have the necessary equipment to address issues at a building this height. The nearest company with proper equipment is at least 15 miles away from the proposed site of warehouses along Route 301. Therefore, we are opposed to this text amendment and feel fire suppression is extremely important and should be considered with future growth in the area. And that's signed sincerely, Charlie Boyles, Chief. The next one is from Christopher and Michael Kent. Are they here, or were they going to testify? Did you testify to your letter, or when you come?
Sure, I can read.
Thank you. We have one from, this is, I guess, Case Demoy's letter, or is that?
Right, this is my email summarizing his information, so. Do you want me to read
Yeah,
it?
might as well, yeah.
I'm back, I got a mic that works,
Oh,
thank you,
good. Yeah,
Cindy.
go ahead, thank you.
All righty. Good afternoon, Planning Commission Chair and members. Yesterday, I reached out to Case Demoy about the discussions of industrial building heights. Case responded quickly, and he kindly provided the attached drawing, that's in your packet, for the overall dimensions of the Dixon Distribution Center, the taller of the two buildings. Case defers to the project's engineer, Kevin Sharon, P.E., and Case provided the engineer's statement, which is included below, and this is a quotation. Even though the town measures roof height differently, based on the attached plan, the overall height from the lowest grade, the loading docks, to the peak of the pitched roof is 52 feet, 0.75, so 52 3/4 feet. The components are a 4-foot-tall loading dock, 42 feet from finished floor to top of rigid frame, and an additional 6 feet 9 inches to the peak of the sloped roof. End quote. Case also noted that when looking at the buildings from Route 213, the overall height of the front facades of both buildings as seen from 213 and as measured from finished grade is 50 feet, as required by the Town of Chesterton zoning ordinance. Many thanks to Case for providing this information and clarification. Sincerely, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a letter from the Chip McLeod Law Group. Is he here? Are you going to testify, Chip? Can you just read that, incorporate that in your testimony? Thank you. The next one is from Tara Weeks Stout, about the zoning tech, and it was Tara here? Can you read?
I can read it, sure.
Thank you.
Regarding zoning text amendment, dear Mr. Mackey, I'm writing in support of the proposed text amendment providing for increased building heights up to 60 feet, including roof protrusions for HVAC or solar panels. Our firm represents developers as well as end users of all types of commercial real estate and can attest to the demand for 45-foot interior clear heights for warehouse space. Developers and users consider an array of factors when expanding or relocating, including a comprehensive review of the zoning code to determine whether they can develop functional space without having to seek variances. One of the biggest selling points for Kent County and the town of Millington is that it can be a lower-cost alternative than sites to the north, such as Middleton, Delaware, and those to the west on the Annapolis side of the Bay Bridge. We have a network of partners working with state, national, and international businesses that are seeking to bring manufacturing and distribution operations to Maryland and look forward to presenting Kent County as a viable option. I applaud this proactive position, which sends a message to the commercial real estate community that Kent County supports responsible development. Best regards, Tara Weeks Stout.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next letter is from the Economic and Tourism Development Commission, signed by Aaron Bramble, or is Jamie or Aaron or someone from that commission going to testify? I guess we should read it then.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Letter of support, zoning text amendment. And this is addressed to the county commissioners, and I checked that they did desire that it also be shared with you all. I am pleased to write this letter of support on behalf of the Kent County Economic and Tourism Development Commission. The EDTC, at their April 12, 2023 meeting, voted unanimously in support of the proposed zoning text amendment that would regulate the permitted height of industrial structures in the 301 corridor. As you know, this is one of only 2 targeted areas in Kent County outside municipal limits to market and attract new businesses. Allowing a larger structure would give the county a greater economic development opportunity. We further ask you to consider raising the building height in all industrial structures located in the 2 areas identified above on industrial and employment center zoned parcels. The Commission is also in full support of defining the 301 corridor in the land use ordinance. Planning, housing, and zoning staff clearly explain how and why this ZTA complies with the comprehensive plan and its highest priorities, as well as changes in these buildings and automated fulfillment technology require this update to previous regulations. We are pleased that the Commissioners will consider this zoning text amendment and look forward to continuing our efforts in locating the responsible developers and businesses along the 301 corridor and in the Wharton industrial area. Sincerely, Aaron Bramble, Chair.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
The next one is from Catherine Walraven Durham. Is she here? Were you going to testify to your letter? Thank you, ma'am. Marlene, is that it?
That ends the letter, sir. Yes, sir.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. We will take comments for the public. You should sign in if you want to testify. We'll just take them in order. We ask that we're only testify once, so provide all the information you want, and so the commission can consider it. Can we start? There's 2 phone numbers online. Do you wish to speak to this text amendment discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the, Cindy, you can, oh, excuse me, yes? Was there a comment from the phone line?
Mr. Chairman, we're driving into the meeting. Could we wait till the end of comments to show up if we possibly can?
Yes, as long as, if you get here by the time we're not finished. Go ahead, Cindy.
So
Okay.
the first person is Wendy Costa.
Is Wendy Costa here?
Yes, but I don't have anything
Thank you.
Are you there? I'm on the phone.
Who's,
Hello?
yes, we hear you on the phone. Who is that?
Yes, Cindy Anderton. And I would like to say a few words at the end or whenever.
Go ahead. We'd love to listen to your comments, ma'am. Was it Cindy Anderson? Anderton? Okay. Sorry.
A-N-D-E-R-T-O-N.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
I live at the corner of 291 and 301, and I'm not opposed to development in Kent County. But you know, Kent County is a pretty small county, and it seems like the warehouses are just out of scale with Kent County. And I would support 45-foot height, but the 60-foot is just too big. We're not that big.
That's all. Thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
Next would be Elizabeth Watson.
No.
Is this microphone working?
Yes, good. Give your name for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Elizabeth Watson. I live at 226 North Kent Street, Apartment B in Chestertown, Maryland. So let me just, I think, since we've referred to Marcia Fritz. Marcia Fritz, by way of background, lived in Kent County until she moved to the Lehigh Valley. I also have been a professional planner working for Lehigh Valley, or for Northampton County, which is where she is also located, so I understand what she is talking about. Gentlemen and lady, this proposal under review is very concerning to this former Kent County resident. 18 years ago, I left Chestertown to move to the beautiful Lehigh Valley in southeastern Pennsylvania. I enjoyed the valley's rolling farm fields, historic buildings, sparkling creeks, and rivers. I loved driving through the countryside then, but no more. In the years since, the valley has been overrun with enormous flat-roofed warehouses. In the 1970s, Bethlehem, where we live, was facing economic catastrophe. Bethlehem Steel closed its factories, leaving thousands unemployed. Through the creativity and dedication of its citizens, the valley has survived and grown. A few years later, though, when the warehouse developers came calling, the government was easily swayed by the promise of good jobs, a growing tax base that guaranteed increased prosperity and clean energy. Now we can see that none of these promises has really come true. Instead, highways, the local and connector roads are crawling with trucks. They are now crumbling and dangerous. The jobs don't provide a living wage, and housing becomes unaffordable for these employees. Union protection for these holding unskilled jobs is poor. Bad things keep happening. For example, a local newspaper reported recently that an Amazon warehouse saved money on their HVAC systems by leaving out air conditioning. The out-of-state company realized it was cheaper to negotiate a contract to keep an ambulance on site during the summer. When the overheated workers collapsed, they were simply carted off to the emergency room. Unbelievable. That's out of this letter. As is so often the case, development breeds on itself, even the bad stuff. Now, while new warehouses are going up, newly constructed ones are empty, with enormous signs advertising availability. Warehouses are becoming more and more automated, eliminating those promised good jobs. In the meantime, the valley is experiencing a shortage of affordable housing. So much for the jobs, the economical development, the support for families. To be fair, something is increasing. Pollution from all of these diesel trucks, according to a study released last month. Runoff from all of these flat roofs and parking lots is growing too. So what can Kent County learn from the Lehigh Valley? These facilities have little to offer the local economy or quality of life. In spite of the promises you're hearing, I encourage you to send them down the road and focus on what makes Kent County and its resources thrive. If you decide to accept them, please place strict restrictions on them. Find out what they precisely mean about their LEED claims, that's L-E-E-D, concerning sustainability of the building. Insist that they power themselves with roof-mounted solar panels, keeping the 45-foot height limit. Thank you for your work for the county. Sincerely yours, Marcia Fritz.
Thank you.
I'm going to be much shorter than that. I'm a planner, and I support development in Kent County. We need a healthy economy, and we need more development and population, and I think we all know that. But we should not be dancing to developers' tunes that they are calling in order simply to meet their immediate needs, but rather setting clear goals and rules for development consistent with our comprehensive plan. We should do our utmost to attract the kind of development we have determined to be in the best interest of the entire community. But that does not mean we have to say yes willy-nilly to the first idea in the door without deep study and thought. Our zoning and comprehensive plan were devised under certain assumptions. What's happening with this is a 50% increase in the density of industrial development sought around Millington. That is not contemplated in our comprehensive plan. This is not an update. This is a major change. Also, the decision that development following the pattern to be set by this proposed amendment should affect a minimum of fully 22 square miles of Kent County should give us equal pause. This is 1 mile on either side of 301, extending the roughly 11 miles of 301 crossing Kent County. Both of these factors, the density and the extent, are sufficiently great a change to Kent County's development process that I believe Kent County should undertake a thorough study to understand the potential cumulative impacts of this. We need to look at Lehigh Valley, we need to look at Carlisle, we need to look lots of places where these kinds of developments are happening. This is our first. Let's do it well. Let's find out what's happening elsewhere. How can we mitigate? How can we anticipate the changes in this business that are happening so rapidly? Many communities are falling behind in meeting the needs of the industry and its standards. So taking a look at all of that, also understand that 1 or 2 will be followed by 3, 4, or 5. What are the cumulative impacts in terms of pollution, water quality, habitat loss, farmland loss, and all the other things that may happen in this area? I personally would like to see a much narrower corridor. 2 miles, a mile on either side of 301 seems extreme in this particular county because of the farmland. So I'm just asking that you all slow it down, give us some real thought. How can you understand what will happen if we say yes to this kind of proposal to the extent that it promises? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the list is Barry Barrel.
I don't want to speak to the height of the buildings.
Aaron Murphy and Dan Garral.
We'd like to ask our attorney to speak, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Chip McLeod. I'm a local attorney, and I'm here representing Everton Industrial Development, and the principals of Everton are here, Mrs. Erin Murphy and Dan Garral in the back, and I'm sure they'd answer any questions if you ask them. I'm also here representing Mr. Russ Richardson, who I know you all are familiar with, and just an interesting note, Mr. Richardson sends his regards. He wishes he could be here, but he's actually attending his 68th high school reunion today. So good for him. One thing I think to be clear about what is the testimony you're receiving today is on a text amendment. It is not on any pending application. And I just introduced Everton Industrial Development. As you know, and the general public knows by now, there is a proposal for actual warehouses in this area, because you all have heard about a concept plan. I mean, you actually had a public hearing on a concept plan about proposed warehouses. So there's a real application. That has nothing to do with today. Today is a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the county commissioners because they've asked for one. It's the county commissioners of Kent County who have initiated this height text amendment. Will this benefit Everton Industrial if it should be legislatively enacted by the commissioners? Yes, because they've said publicly they would like to build a taller building, and they've presented the reasons why. But I want to be clear for everybody procedurally, and even for the general public, because I know some people are anxious to comment on this and let their thoughts be known. This is not a particular application. It's a question about amending the zoning ordinance for height. We do have a letter that we submitted. I'd like to waive reading of the letter. I don't want to take the commission's time with that. I hope you all will read it. One of the things that precipitated our follow-up letter was some of the testimony or letters we saw that came into the Planning Commission alleging certain facts. I think that's been clarified. There was a lot of discussion out in the community about the size of the Dixon building at the Chestertown Business Campus. I think that question has been resolved now factually before you all by what I heard you read from Mr. Demoy. So I think that's been resolved. I do want to say, in our letter, we did touch on, you received a correspondence that talked about landmarks and how many silos and tall things are all around Kent County. I mean, it seems like this discussion has gotten a little bit far afield. I know when I was here testifying last time before you all, there was a lot of reaction to something 60 feet tall. Now, we're talking about not just 60 feet tall, but large in mass. But, there was, we just want to try to rein in this discussion about that there are a lot of things taller than 60 feet all around Kent County. Some of the things that are taller than 60 feet on farms, and there's many, many of them, they aren't part of our traditional cultural landscape. I just want to point this out. When you talk about our traditional cultural landscape of Kent County 200 years ago, it didn't have some of the things that we see on farms that are very tall, and it didn't have a lot of other things. So again, I'm just trying to help bring some context. I want to speak to the issue of fire or emergency services. Again, this is a text amendment, so you don't have an application in front of you to really assess the actual impacts or emergency services impacts on a particular project, meaning if something happens here, who's the first responding fire company? Since the last meeting, we did do some follow-up because we heard the comments about fire suppression. And I'm going to testify to what I learned, and you have some letters actually from some of the fire people. And let me say this about fire companies. Every local volunteer fire company needs a bigger truck and a newer truck, and we know that. When I spoke to both representatives of the Millington Fire Company and the Sudlersville Fire Company, which is relevant, here's what I learned, and you heard this in the letter. Millington Fire Company does not have a ladder truck. Sudlersville Fire Company does have a ladder truck, 75-foot. The reason they have it, incidentally, was when the Foxtown Senior Housing Project was proposed in Sudlersville, and because of its height, the fire company said, whoa, 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 we don't have something to handle this. They worked it out between the county and the developers and whatever, and they got a fire truck to handle that building. It all worked out. What I was also told and learned, and I know from some of my experience representing local governments, box alarms. Fire companies have agreements on what happens if an alarm goes off and who responds. So today, if an alarm goes off in Millington for a very, very tall building or a grain silo near Millington, you're going to have 3 companies alerted: Chestertown, Sudlersville, and Clayton, Delaware, because they all have ladder trucks. So that today, if there's an alarm today for a silo near Millington, those are the companies that are going to be called. I mean, one of the letters said there's nobody closer than 15 miles with a ladder. I think Sudlersville is closer to Millington than 15 miles, and Sudlersville has a ladder truck. Now, I'm not a fire expert. I'm not speaking on behalf of any fire company. This was just a few calls to members of these companies to better understand really what happens. I believe that issue should be addressed when you're dealing with specific projects, and often when it comes to emergency equipment that is much needed for volunteer fire companies, when local governments start negotiating annexation agreements or developer rights and responsibility agreements or public works agreements, that's often a time they're able to say, hey, you know what, because of the impacts of this development we're enabling, we need you to help us with these things too. So That's just my observation on how issues like that get addressed. I don't think because every fire company in Kent County doesn't have a ladder truck is why a planning commission wouldn't recommend, for other reasons, building height increases. And then I'd like to comment just on the comment about, the concern about the definition of the 301 corridor. Defining the corridor, as your staff has recommended, is a good idea to have it legally defined in the code. I don't know that it has to run the whole length of Route 301 that comes through Kent County. If you look at the way the county has been zoning land, even in the 301 corridor for the past 20 years, most of it's still open from a zoning standpoint. If you just look at the map that the staff provided, again, just a suggestion, I don't know that when you define the 301 corridor, it needs to actually run that entire length of how 301, the actual street. You have a designated growth area. You certainly want to recognize that. And then finally, I do want to speak to the minutes. Commissioner Reeder made a comment about the meeting minutes. And this came to my attention when I actually reviewed the minutes, and I have to agree, and I just want to make a suggestion. They're your minutes, they're not ours, the public's. If you're recording your meetings, your minutes really need to just talk about votes and basic things, and I know Ms. McCann knows this. If you're recording them, it's easier to just say, listen to the recording if you want to know who said what. Because, and I'll just speak for myself, when I looked at the minutes, and look at me, look how long I'm talking, and I know you get tired of me talking. The summary of my comments from your last meeting just said that I commented on the lack of landscaping at the Dixon Building and the Gillespie Building, basically. I'm summarizing. Now, I said a lot more than that, and if I had to show my, that doesn't really reflect what was discussed at the last meeting. So I'm just saying, better to say nothing about who said what if you have a recording than try to paraphrase what everybody said. So I think that would help. And yeah, that's enough on that. Thank you all very much, unless you have any questions.
Thank you.
Next is Cynthia Saunders.
Oh, that's helpful. I'm Cynthia Saunders. I live at 102 North Queen Street and have for 43 years. I'm here at the bequest of Marcia Fritz, who was a longtime resident of Kent County and Queen Street and an architect, and a one-time candidate for county commissioner. She had read a letter in the Chestertown Spy. She remains extremely interested in what happens here in Kent County, deeply involved in previously in planning issues and so on. So she asked me to come today and to basically represent her concerns, and basically, I don't want to take your time up. Elizabeth Watson read her letter into your record. I basically was here to ask if you had received her letter. Obviously you have, so I will reassure her about that. The other question that I am asking on her behalf and my own is that is there room for further commentary for testifying before you all in future issues about this, or for submitting more documentation? That's my question to you. What I wanted to reiterate from her commentary is, I know this is about your height limit. I'm not an expert in this field at all. A retired social worker, this is not my field. And so what basically she was concerned about, and it does have to do with that, is once you start making exceptions, when you're not looking at a silo, you're looking at massive blocks of building. About when you open that, when there's one, there's two, then there's three, and what her experience has been in Lehigh Valley is directly pertinent, that it opens the door to more. and that it's not necessarily been delivering on all of the promises that were made. So visually, you have something potentially horrendous, and you have also a failure down the road to provide the good-paying jobs that we all hope for this county. We know that we need them. The other issue that she spoke to and asked me to reiterate, which Elizabeth did as well, is to ask for these developers for specific definitions of what they mean by LEED. There's a lot of room in there, and she suggests that you would be well advised, and we would as a county, to know exactly what they mean in terms of clean energy and how they're going to screen their property and how they're going to mitigate damage or upset to the environment around it, not just visually, but in terms of wildlife habitat, so on and so forth, sediment control and whatever. A critical part of that, and I'll end on this, is that maintenance of landscape. One of the gentlemen who spoke was, talking about using AI because he's not a landscape architect. I would suggest that, in this case with this kind of development, that's a critical part of it, because you can plant half-dead white pines and walk away from them and have no effective screening visually or habitat left. So maintenance of any landscaping, as well as the planning of the landscaping, is a great idea. So I reiterate that I am also presenting these ideas. I'm in concordance with them. Thank you very much for listening to me today.
To your point on procedure, I hope today will make a recommendation to the county commissioners, and then you will have an opportunity at their meeting to offer further comments too.
Good. I'll pass that along. Thank you.
Am I all right there?
Good afternoon. Melinda Bookwalter. I live on West Edge Road. Our back property line is Mills Branch Creek. We have 8 acres of forested wetlands. And thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm opposed to increasing the height of the distribution center building. The increased height would increase the building interior volume by 1/3. This change was suggested by LRK Architects, Designers, Planners, a firm located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in a letter dated 2/23/23 to William A. Mackey. The reason for this suggestion of it being taller than the 45 degrees and subsequent recommendation was because state-of-the-art advancements in robotics and vertical storage housing. Robotics. Does this translate into fewer jobs? Isn't greater employment a purpose? And 2 previous persons have spoken to that. Vertical storage. Does this translate into even more trucks? Safety issues, noise, pollution, environmental and visual impact. Chip McLeod spoke of lots of things taller than 60 feet, but not a slab building that is 250 feet by 1,000 feet. It is of grave concern to me that an out-of-state suggestion recommendation could have a greater voice than that of our community. A 60 by 256 or 250,000 square foot building is not compatible with any of the buildings in the surrounding area or scaled to the environment, existing roads, circles, bridges, or overpasses. And if allowed, it creates a precedent for another 60-foot high building on the east side of 301 in the mixed-use district, which would, quote from the same report as before, would combine the underlying employment center and commercial districts, again, from the aforementioned letter from LRK. I am not opposed to development. For example, what is proposed for the Millington expansion by Russ Richardson is well worth considering for its benefits to the town. However, keep development controlled and in scale with the surrounding properties, the people who live here, the nature of Kent County, and the environment. Warehouses and distribution centers of this height and size do not meet those criteria. Just as an aside, our first hummingbirds, where I live, showed up on May 1st, 3 days ago, at our window feeder facing the forested wetland bounded by Mills Branch Creek. Will that wetland still be as hospitable to them, to other wildlife, and us, with the impact of 2 large distribution centers just down creek? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Catherine Dura.
Catherine W. Durham, 10970 Dudley Chance Road. Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners.
Catherine,
Yes.
pull it just a little closer.
Okay.
Thank you.
How's that?
Good.
Is that good? Okay. Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. I spoke to you last month about why I opposed the proposed text amendment, specifically changing the height allowance on a building in the 301 growth corridor from 45 to 60 feet. I still oppose this. At the meeting last month, the commissioners asked for pictures of actual buildings that were approximately 60 feet. I thought that was a great idea. I see there are several examples in today's packet for us to look at. These are beautiful buildings from the campus of Salisbury University. There were also some pictures of warehouses, too. Also provided for us to view excuse me, also provided for us to view are the photographic examples of screenings for buildings generated by an artificial intelligence program, DAL-E2. We see potential landscaping drawings added into the pictures of the warehouse-type buildings. A scale is also there on page 48 to use as a reference for a person to view or block the view of a building at a certain distance. Using this scale suggestions under the drawings, I calculated that from my property, which is approximately 500 feet away, a wall of trees 50 feet tall would be needed for me not to see the building 60 feet tall. So, since I do not think it is possible to plant 50-foot trees, I guess that would mean a 20-foot berm with 30 feet trees on top, or some other combination. It's certainly something to think about. That's pretty tall. That would block the view from my house, though, from day one, if that calculation was followed, and that size trees were planted, not smaller trees that would take many, many, many years to grow. So potentially, the 60-foot building could be blocked from the view from my house or from other areas. I'm not sure about the view from 301 because that's at a different height. Now, I wonder how in the world we can block the noise and the smell and the traffic from all of those tractor trailers going in and out all day and night. But of course we cannot, because noise and smell and traffic cannot be blocked. So, this is the major problem with the request for increasing the size of the building. Doesn't increasing the size directly mean the building can handle more business, which in turn would mean more noise and smell and tractor trailers in and out? Do you know what the SHA has to say about the traffic study that was done? Was the projected number of trucks in and out of the 2 buildings 45 feet tall with a total of 132 tractor trailer bays taken into account? What would Would increasing the height of the building to 60 feet increase the number of trucks in and out? Does this important information exist so that this commission can have all of the information needed to understand the implications of changing the height? How in the world the little 301-291 intersection built back in 1999 is going to handle all the truck traffic from 132 truck bays plus car traffic, but we might not have to worry about too much car traffic because there probably won't be many cars there because the building 60 feet tall with robotics inside would probably take lots of jobs away at the employment center. Changing the height of the building from 45 to 60 feet can seem to be just a small change, but when all of the aspects of the changes are studied, it is a very big change to consider. So much will be affected. If this change is made, it will affect all of the construction in the future buildings in this area, 2 more proposed on the east side of 301, and other buildings in and around the Massey area. Planning commissioners, please consider tabling this proposed zoning text amendment until you can receive professional consultation on all of the aspects of how this massive mess will actually affect everyone in Kent County forever. Thank you for your time. And I'd also like to add, from what I'm hearing this morning, earlier in the meeting, it very much concerns me that I understand that Ms. Reeder is on another committee, the Economic Development Committee, and I certainly think this is showing a conflict of interest and ask that she recuse herself or be recused from voting on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Leisinger?
Good afternoon. I'm John Leisinger. I live at 10948 Chesterville Road in Chesterville, Kennedyville. I want to say up front that I am not opposed to warehouse development at the crossroads of 301 and 291. However, in these discussions, we're often getting confused between the merits of the project as it's been seen or proposed already and the long-term implications of having 60-foot buildings on the whole length of the 301 corridor. Mr. Mackey is, in his materials, presented a graphic which showed 22 square miles of potential development, and I ask you to take the long view, not the view over the next 2 to 5 years or even 10 years, but think about what's happened in Hartford County and Middletown, developments that people could not have foreseen and certainly were not foreseen at the time the land use ordinance was drafted or the comprehensive plan written. So again, I want to emphasize the long view and not get too much confused by what the merits of the Everton project might be. I would also submit that this commission is not supposed to be a policy-making body, especially when the implications of any decisions you make or recommendations you make can make basic changes to the character of Kent County. That should be left to the voters in a much more thoughtful and thorough process. I would be surprised if anyone at the time that the comprehensive plan was written or the land use ordinance were written had any idea that 60-foot buildings might be in the future. If anything, they would have thought about projects which existed at the time, 2007, which would have been perhaps the Tidewater Publishing Building down on 301, or Dixon Valve. neither of which at the time certainly approached 60 feet or would have this kind of presence. No one envisioned in 2007 or in the late 90s, when the comprehensive plan was last thoroughly revised, the nature of distribution centers as they exist today. As I think about the plans at this site for 60 feet, with all due respect to Mr. Mackey's drawings, I would say that they are, I guess my polite term would be baloney. There's no way that the landscape drawings that he presents can have any relevance. The attractive buildings that he shows from Salisbury University would look nothing like the featureless warehouse buildings with very large parking lots and too many truck bays. There is no way to screen a project like that, let alone one which would have grown to 60 feet. Trees grow slowly. There's not enough, on this property at least, and we're setting precedent for other properties, there's just not enough width to buffer parking lots and structures. So it's important that whatever we do, we think about the long-term implications, not just for this site, but for the entire corridor and any other place that this ordinance might apply throughout the county. In the package, the thing that startled me most was Mr. Mackey's drawing of the corridor. And it just reminded me that whatever you adopt here, whatever you recommend to the commissioners, is not ever and cannot ever be limited to the small property along Edge Road that we're discussing today. So I am opposed to the 60-foot height limitation. I'm very concerned that any recommendation you make does not embrace the notion that the corridor be 22 square miles. And we should put a lot more thought and community input into it than is present here today, because I'm willing to bet that almost all, virtually all, of the people who will be impacted by this proposal are not present, aren't even aware of what's going on here. Finally, with all due respect, and I say this with some concern, I think that any member of this commission who has already publicly decided upon their position before hearing all the public testimony, before weighing all the evidence, who's taken a public stand in the paper and in other meetings, should disqualify themselves from voting on this proposal. Thank you.
Next is Thomas Mason.
My name is P. Thomas Mason, 23991 Melitota Road, Chestertown. And today, from what I understand, we're only addressing the height of the buildings, not whether this is a good thing or a bad thing in this warehouse or whatever else might be there. So that's all I'm talking about. I think this is very consistent. To increase the height is very consistent with other structures in Kent County. When you look around Kent County, how many silos, even though they're not used today, are taller than 60 feet? In fact, or 65 feet is, I think that's the distance we're wanting to go to. Is it 65 or 60? Whatever it is. It actually, I think it should be going higher to prepare for the future. I'm assuming grain facilities Most all grain facilities, the leg is more than 65 feet. You're talking about 100 foot. Now, I'm assuming we're all opposed to them then. It makes no sense to me that we want to continue to go backwards rather than try to go forward. As far as there's been silo FARs and an 80-foot silo that the FAR companies have been able to put out. I don't know of any FARs in a grain leg, but it's possible it could happen. But we have allowed all of that. I look at this as similar to 4 years ago when we had in our zoning ordinance, you could only have 50,000 square feet of roof space in your agricultural zone for a business. Well, that was done at a time it was done, and man, that's a lot of feet. But it was not, we changed that to 75,000 feet because things expand, things grow. And we've got to keep up with, look forward rather than always be looking backward. Like I say, this should be a short discussion of whether or not we increase this or don't increase it. It definitely should be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Michael Kent.
I'm Michael Kent, 31245 Chesterville Bridge Road, Millington. We sent a letter in to you guys that you all should have a copy. My father and I wrote this week. I'll just read that letter so it goes on the record. We write to you today to express our deep opposition to Resolution 2023-2, which proposes to increase the allowable building heights for industrial structures along the 301 corridor from 45 feet to 60 feet. Please understand that we support our county attracting new businesses, including warehouse operations, however, not at the expense of creating an environment that is potentially unsafe and unhealthy for people who live near the 301 corridor. The recently completed 2018 County Comprehensive Plan identifies the concept of warehouses for the development of the 301 corridor. The reality, however, is that a warehouse with a 60 feet height limitation is very different from a warehouse constructed under the county land use ordinance, which limits industrial structures to a maximum height of 45 feet, from visual, structural, and functional perspectives. The type of warehouse built with a maximum allowable height of 45 feet is comparable with the types of warehouses envisioned in the comprehensive plan. A warehouse with the allowable height of 60 feet is not. Quite simply, it is the difference between a traditional industrial warehouse and a high cube fulfillment center warehouse. The current ZTA is driven by a variance request from Everton Incorporated. Of course, we do not know what the ultimate use for the Everton proposed warehouses will be because there is insufficient information to make any kind of an informed decision. Even the Planning Commission staff have had to guess regarding to what the proposed warehouses might look like, admittedly using AI to simulate impacts. Ironically, it seems that in trying to examine those simulated impacts, staff used the assumptions of a height limitation of 50 feet, not the proposed 60 feet. It's clear to us that neither the members of the Planning Commission nor the commissioners currently have adequate data to decide on a proposed height increase. Further, it certainly does not seem prudent to make such a consequential change to the land use ordinance, and this is a very consequential change, without considering the proposed project in its entirety. We hope you understand our concern. And hope that you guys will give the county commissioners a negative recommendation on it. Thank you.
Before I start my testimony, I too would like to say that it is improper for somebody who has already made up their mind on warehousing and height to be sitting here today making a decision without having heard all of the testimony, and that it reflects poorly on the ability of the community to feel that they are being listened to and heard, and that their input is being weighed and valued. I submitted a letter that included the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission report. I hope that that is considered today as you're moving forward. It would be appropriate for this body to request the ability to be doing some proactive studies into the future rather than reacting as text amendments come forward. I know that a lot of you like maps, so I have some for you to look at while I give you my testimony today. Does anybody? Oh, okay, and I have a few for the audience, if somebody, if people in the audience want to look at them. How many do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Thank you.
I have a few. If anybody wants, does anybody want to see this? Yeah? You'll have to share, I'm sorry. Today, I'm going to review why this update to the Kent County Zoning Code, Article 5, Section 11, is a violation of the state constitution, Article 3, Section 33. Section 33 is a provision against special regulation to prevent one who has sufficient influence to secure legislation that would give them an undue advantage over others. And I just want to note, based on what Chip has said, it doesn't matter if the legislation is proposed by the commissioners or by some developer or in the area. So it still is there to protect against advantages. So I wanted to say that a current application from Everton, Inc. that the Planning Commission was asked to comment on in November is in the 301 corridor and is an industrial structure on land owned by Russ Richardson, which has been reviewed by the TAC twice. This text amendment is specific to industrial structures in the 301 corridor. The TAC commented on April 12th meeting on Everton Industrial Preliminary Major Site Plan for Lot 1 and 2 in the following way. Quote, update maximum building height information, reflect current land use ordinance, or wait for text amendment, end quote. On February 23rd, LRK, on behalf of Mr. Russ Richardson, submitted a letter to the Planning Commission. The letter, quote, updating and superseding previously proposed text changes, end of quote. And it stated, quote, it is recommended that the permitted height for distribution centers and other industrial buildings be increased from 45 feet to 60 feet, end quote. The Kent County Planning Staff analysis for the ZTA in April stated, quote, in conversations with designers of the proposed industrial structures currently under review, 60 feet was mentioned, end of quote. Figure 1 that I've passed out to you is a parcel map of the properties in the 301 corridor. There are approximately 36 plus or minus properties that are in the employment center, industrial, and commercial districts to which this ZTA would theoretically apply at first glance. However, Figure 2, the second map that you have, depicts the access to water and sewer. According to Mike Molds, Director of Public Works, quote, there is no existing public water and sewer service in the Massey area, and there are no plans to extend service. Most of the discussions now relate to replacement and expansion of the Millington wastewater treatment plant for growth around Millington and the 301 corridor, end of quote. Without water and sewer access without water and sewer access, the properties to the north on the 301 corridor will not be able to take advantage of this ZTA until some unforeseeable time in the future, most likely well over a decade from now, even assuming immediate construction begins to facilitate such improvements. Therefore, the only properties that are in a position to utilize this ZTA until the next comprehensive rezoning are the properties in and around 301 and 291 interchange. The Figure 3 map focuses on the properties that are positioned to utilize this ZTA. The only properties that can take advantage of this ZTA are therefore parcels owned or controlled by Russ Richardson. Any argument to the contrary either involves the northern parcels, which do not have the requisite public facility improvements, or the 3 small parcels to the south of Russ Richardson's land holdings. The 3 small parcels include a 1.06 acre lot split in the middle by a road and therefore categorically unable to develop anything industrial in nature. The 6 acre lot is presently improved by Food Lion without sufficient land for additional development. The remaining 4.5 acre lot is irregularly shaped around an existing developed parcel and with the requisite setbacks and frontage requirements means that the size of the actual parcel that can be developed is 80,000 square feet, including space that would be needed for parking. This ZTA is narrowly focused on one area of the county. The enactment of the ZTA, as stated by the staff report, is intended to permit a higher building, the practical effect of which is to permit a type of development at a scale previously not contemplated by our zoning ordinance. The staff has confirmed that the designer of the current Everton project sought a height increase, and a letter from LRK on behalf of Russ Richardson also recommended a height increase. There is no public need. Economic development can continue in this designated growth area without this zoning text amendment. So you have a choice here. Either a distribution center cannot exist without the proposed zoning change, and this ZTA is adding a new right to allow it, or a distribution warehouse can proceed with the existing zoning code height of 45 feet, and the law is adequate. Therefore, the only reason for the higher height is to increase the financial gain of a developer. This ZTA is arbitrarily constructed on account of narrowing the law to only apply to certain properties in one geographic location, which is narrowed further by access to water and sewer. And most importantly, this ZTA, in effect, benefits only Russ Richardson and the properties that he controls, because the other 30 or so parcels to the north cannot take advantage of this ZTA, and the smaller parcels southward do not have the development envelopes capable of constructing distribution-centered styled warehouses. The intent of the development contemplated by the lobbying materials submitted in support of the passage. I would like to recommend that the Planning Commission that the comprehensive rezoning is ongoing and that the changes in this ZTA could be properly considered in a non-special law context by incorporating it into the rezoning process and contemplating its impacts relative to other zoning changes and map changes. It is not only the narrow construction of the ZTA, but also its procedural posture that makes obvious its design is to benefit one person's business pursuits. The Planning Commission has the obligation to not only determine consistency with the comprehensive plan and Kent County's land use ordinance, but must also consider state law. I urge this body to give an unfavorable recommendation to the ZTA based on Article 3, Section 33, pertaining to special law. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
we have someone online who want to mute, or or would you like to testify?
I'm muting, thank you.
Thank you.
Pat Langenfelder.
My name is, excuse me, Pat Langenfelder, 11974 Black Station Road in Kennedyville. I'm not opposed to any development in the Millington or 301 corridor. I'm concerned about raising the height of the building, allowable height of the building to 60 feet by right. If you were going to pass this text amendment, I would recommend that rather than, we currently have a 45-foot limit. If you were going to have a 60-foot height limit, but not by right, make it by a special exception. That way you could have a certain parameters, certain conditions required to be met by whoever's going to be the builder, whoever's applying for the building permit. Things like setbacks, a fire plan, traffic plan approval, stormwater management, water and sewer plan, wildlife habitat protection, environmental impacts, and so forth. But have all these conditions already laid out ahead of time and that developer comes in with a plan with meeting all these conditions before you can say, okay, you can go to 60 feet. Also, they would be required to tell you what the use of the building will be, not let's just build it and they will come. The approval process, as I'm looking at it now, is kind of piecemeal. Somebody came in and wants 60-foot building raised to 60 feet, and we go, okay, let's think about it. Yeah, go ahead, let's do it, or no, let's not do it. But we should have it a better plan, a better layout in our minds, in our land use ordinance for such a thing. So my request of you is to send an unfavorable report to the commissioners as the text amendment is currently stated, and suggest that the commissioners, if they want to raise this to 60 feet, that they work out a special exception type of thing. When we moved here and we wanted to build a hog barn, it was a special exception, and probably still is for large confinement operations. We had to meet a whole lot of conditions before we would get permission when we moved here, and yet this is an ag-friendly county, and it is. But we had to meet conditions before we would get approval to do our construction. So I don't see why it can't be done for something like this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Judy Gifford.
Thank you. My name is Judy Gifford, 12246 Locust Grove Road, Kennedyville, Maryland. And I'd just like to say we listened on the car, and we couldn't hear a lot of the comments. So Mr. Hickman, we could hear you. Ms. McCann, we could hear you. But a lot of the people who were talking were not audible, so maybe just reinforce the microphone usage if you could. And I would like to add that I think Ms. Reeder should recuse herself. That was a unanimous vote at the EDC. She could have abstained, and I think it really tarnishes the credibility of this board if she is allowed to vote on this proposal. You guys are put in a hard position, I understand that, mostly because you haven't been given enough information, and I want to commend the public for providing information to help you make a good decision. Without that Lehigh Valley document, which I read, I would have had no idea how bad these things can be. And you can't separate the height from the proposal. I mean, you're not going to have 60-foot increase for nothing. I mean, it's got to be tied into the proposal. And by the way, Mr. Mason, 12,500 of my silos would fit in this footprint. So to compare these to this development to churches or silos is just really comparing ants to elephants. It just makes no sense. And as was mentioned last meeting, that we need to do this particular proposal because of Kerwin. Your job is not to fund Kerwin. That's the commissioner's job. Your job is to look at this proposal and decide its impact on Kent County and the people who live here. According to the American Planning Institute Code of Ethics, planners should pay special attention to the interrelatedness in decisions and their unintended consequences. We have not been given any information by the planning director on any of those kinds of considerations. Planners should also have special concern for long-range consequences, past and present. We have no idea what opening these floodgates will do to our county. A planner should provide timely, adequate, clear, accessible, and accurate information on planning issues to affected persons and the public. Planners are bound to conserve and preserve the integrity and heritage of the natural built environment. Use principles of sustainability and resilience as guiding influence in their work. A planner should also identify the human and environmental consequences of alternative actions, including the short and long-term costs and benefits. Identify social and cultural values which should be preserved, as well as natural elements. Because you were giving none of this information ahead of this vote, I really think you need to just deny it and ask the commissioners to conduct a study. This is a very, very big deal that will impact Kent County forever. And once you open these floodgates with a text amendment, you will never be able to close them down. You will lose total control over the process for any future proposal. I mean, we haven't looked at the traffic study. The only reason given to raise this height from 45 to 60 was so the developer could get out of bed in the morning. He said he wouldn't get out of bed for a smaller proposal. But we've not seen any good reason. You can have 45-foot warehouses. You don't have to have 60-foot. So why do we have to have 60-foot warehouses? There's been no good reason. And in fact, if you read the Lehigh study, it will show you that jobs decrease with higher height because it's more automated. So it's unclear the benefit that raising this height will give to the county. And the traffic study is another thing. I don't see how you can be asked to vote on this without having any idea what the impact on traffic will be in that area. So there are so many questions and so few answers that it's impossible for you all to make an informed decision, and I feel bad that you've been put into this position. But because of that, I think you have no other choice than to deny this application. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is William Graham.
Good afternoon. I'm William Graham. I live in Galena on Main Street. What I'm hearing today is a reason to make these changes is to increase business. As a resident of Galena on Main Street, I'm very aware, as I think you are, that if you cross the state line at Delaware and Maryland, you pay a price through the tolls. It's a pretty high price, and there's every incentive if you go into Middletown to go through Galena to save $4, right? I'm sure all of you do that. I'm suggesting that you include Galena, the traffic impact that this increase would have in studies that related to this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Wendy Costa, 9813 Crumpton Road, Millington, Maryland. Several months ago, I attended a well-attended meeting in Millington by developers about who presented a really wonderful plan, I thought, for the future of for growth in Millington, with walking and biking trails, some housing, mixed-use development. There was nothing about 60-foot-high warehouses. And I just came to express my opposition to raising the height limit. I think we don't want to look like Middletown. And we can have attractive warehouses that are, and distribution centers that are lower. And we should insist on that. I think it would be very hard to control if you change this in a text amendment. I don't know of anybody in Kent County who wants our county to look like Middletown. And we don't have to. We can make attractive, useful development in the Millington area. And I'm also concerned about, as other people have suggested, about the traffic. I live on 291 by the, 290, I'm sorry, by the Crumpton Bridge. There is absolutely no enforcement of speed limits. There are trucks going 60 miles an hour in a 30-mile-an-hour zone. They're constantly having to repair the bridge because of the weight and the speed of these trucks. And this commission needs to consider how many more and much bigger trucks you're going to have on 290 and 291 if you raise the limit and have more and bigger trucks. So I am opposed to changing the height limit. Thank you.
Anyone else out? We have no more on the list. Does anyone online or on the phone wish to comment? Okay. That's back to the commission. Would you?
In summary, I don't know if you can hear me or not. Kent County has gone through these spells of being picked on. And so far, we've made that pretty well, but this one, I would see these outside people coming in here and rule at the masses. Look at this pristine, best county in the United States. So having said all that, I agree with most of the speakers, and we don't need that extra limit, but it looks like we're going to get it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of comments. Obviously, there's several people who would like to see me recuse myself from the meeting, so I'd like to address that. I've discussed this with council, and to my knowledge, I'm not required to recuse myself on this particular vote. Is that correct, Cindy? Yes. So there's several other things I think I'm going to ask this commission to take into consideration. And I want to start by reading a direct quote from the Lehigh Valley study that I think has a bearing on our vote today. Specifically, it says, as communities implement sustainable building practices, the benefit of reduced building footprint through increased building height should be considered. Increased vertical impact is likely to result in the need for less land to develop these facilities and will result in reduced pressure on greenfield development. Furthermore, they said, although relatively new land use, the nature of high cube and automated warehouses to be highly efficient opens them to many sustainable opportunities to reduce development pressure and lessen their carbon footprint. That's out of the study that we were asked to read in consideration of the opponent's perspective. The other thing I want to bring up here for our recollection is that the comprehensive plan, land use goal 2 of the comprehensive plan, provides for the county to adopt rules and regulations to locate employment centers and expand and provide more diversity in the size and type of businesses. When the consultant that was hired by the county to review the comprehensive plan issued its report, it gave the county an F grade for supporting that goal, that land use goal. I believe that the commissioners have come to us and asked us for this consideration to give them more flexibility as they consider and as we consider proposals for land use in the 301 corridor. I would also note that previously adopted rules and regulations for land use in the 301 corridor place no limit on the number of square feet that can be utilized in commercial and employment center structures. So you can go out as far as you want as far as our land use requirements go. You just can't go up, when in fact the current nature of warehousing opportunities for development typically look at a high degree of automation that requires a higher interior space, and also when it's also deemed to be more efficient and less intrusive on ground use, to go up. We're talking about a 15-foot increase in the permissible height of buildings. 15 feet, that's not a lot. We're not talking about high cube development, which the Lehigh proposal does address. High cube warehousing facilities are typically over 100 feet. We're not talking about that. Furthermore, we're not talking about approving any particular proposal. As a number of other commentators have noted, every single applicant who comes before us and before the commissioners is going to have to create a plan that meets all of the traffic, stormwater, habitat protection requirements of the county in order to get our approval. So this is just giving the commissioners more flexibility in considering potential development opportunities for the 301 corridor, which it seems to me makes a lot of sense. So I would urge us to not table this. I think we have sufficient information to make that decision and move forward with a vote.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got, it comes back to these zoning text amendments, and they're hard to pass. They're exceedingly hard to overturn. And when you go in there for your text amendments, one of the qualifying things for it is to prove the public need. That's in there for a reason. It's a high bar to get. You don't need it for a zoning text amendment. I mean, a special exception. And I don't know where the public need has been proven on this. I go back to the definition, and it says public need. And I got this out of the Clean Water Act. That's the only place I could find it. Public need means an activity or project that provides important tangible and intangible gains to society, meaning the people of Kent County, I'm going to say, that satisfies the expressed or observed needs of the public where the accrued benefits significantly outweigh reasonably foreseeable detriments. I think that's what you need to prove, and I haven't seen that proven to me. I'm sorry, you know, I'm not against any kind of building, as long as it meets what's in the ordinance. And if someone comes into this county with a project, they can apply for a special exception. That gives us a lot of control over those, and a special exception we used to call conditional uses. You put restrictions on those, and if they don't meet them, they lose their special exception. If they don't do the landscaping that's required, if they don't, they come in here and they say they're going to employ 25, 30 people, and they put up a building that employs 3. You know, I looked at the Lehigh Valley. Once we got that letter, I said, well, hell, I'll be honest with you, a year ago, I didn't even know what logistics center was. I had a client that said that they ran logistics centers. I had to go home and Google it. I didn't know what in the world it was. So I looked at it, and the aerial photograph for the Lehigh Valley on those big buildings up there was taken the 23rd of November 2020. And I looked it up, it's a Wednesday. And there's very few cars in those parking lots, very few. You've got a building up there that's 190,000 square feet, had 4 cars in it on a Wednesday. I'm assuming it was open. So that's my problem with it. I just don't see where, what you want as far as a 60, if you want an 80-foot building, you can come in here for a special exception for that. It's already shown through the reports that we got that 10 years ago, 28 or 25 was the norm. Now it's 40 or 30, 50, 60. What's it going to be in another 10 years? 80 feet? Where does it stop? But you can handle that to a special exception on a case-by-case basis. If someone had applied for a special exception for these buildings, they would have been through that process already in the time we've been looking at this text amendment. And as I say, when I look at that text amendment, that's one of the requirements, and that was put in there for a specific reason, and it's just not in the Kent County zoning ordinance, in almost all ordinances you look at. When you go for that special exception, or for the text amendment, boom, there it is, prove the public need. And when someone can come in here and prove the public need where what is being done significantly outweigh any detriments to the rest of the public, I'll vote for it every time.
Yeah.
I want to speak to the public need, Mr. Crowdy. I appreciate you offering it. But that is a specific definition of the Clean Water Act. Unfortunately, in our zoning code, we don't have a definition of public need. And it's not a term that's widely used in the case law and in zoning decisions. It has been used in liquor licensing cases that I've seen. The more recent case that I saw, I shouldn't cite because it's an unpublished opinion, but in it, it cited an earlier published decision back in 1967. So that just goes to show that the term public need isn't widely addressed in zoning case law. And citing to that decision, it said that the Court of Appeals determined that need must be considered as elastic and relative. Clearly, it doesn't mean absolute necessity, and it's been judicially held to mean expedient, reasonably convenient, and useful to the public. So that's how public need has been defined in at least one zoning case, and again, it's not one that's widely used or discussed or judicially determined, so don't have a definition in our zoning ordinance. So it's something that you're required to consider, but I think it's an elastic term, and I think you need to discuss it as part of your decision-making and your findings.
Do you feel that the definition from the bill gave was not accurate to how we look at it? Or it's not flexible enough?
Could we implement it too?
Do you want to read it again?
Yeah, I guess. need means an activity or project that provides important tangible and intangible gains to society, that satisfies the expressed or observed needs of the public where accrued benefits significantly outweigh reasonably foreseeable detriments.
Can I make a comment, Joe?
Sure.
I think if you take into account the findings of the Economic Development Commission, that they believe there is a public need for this kind of flexibility to attract appropriate levels of appropriate interest by potential developers, all of whom, frankly, are going to come from out of state. The fact of the matter here is that just 11% of the land, unincorporated land in Kent County, has been zoned for development. 11%. If that were totally covered with development, it wouldn't change the character of Kent County. It's furthermore congregated and concentrated in a particular location. So unlike ruling by variance, where you can have spot stuff happen, which has happened all over the county, and it's not, frankly, in my opinion, the way to conduct zoning governance, you have a single location. So the chicken little testimony that this will forever change the nature of this county if this is adopted, I think is a stretch at the best. So again,
When the Economic Development and Tourism Commission decided it, what was their review process about tourism?
they felt it wouldn't be affected.
So in your discussions, when the vote was taken, tourism was considered?
Well, the commission has to always consider both tourism and economic development. Unfortunately, we haven't had very much economic development. We've been pretty successful with tourism, but economic development has really faltered. And the consideration here is that this county needs to find a balance.
The consideration from the economic development?
No, I think my personal opinion is that we need to find a balance.
That's what the Economic Development Commission discussed, was the balance, or?
I think what Ms. Reeder said was that they considered public need, but I don't think that's clear in the letter that they sent, and it's not part of their remit.
Well, that's my feeling is the economic, you brought their review and their unanimous affirmation of approval of this, but we don't have the conditions. You were at the meeting, but we don't have the conditions of what you considered. And I think tourism, the gateway to Kent County, is a consideration, whether it's 45 or 60.
Well, that may be a consideration when it comes time to review specific applications. This is just providing the commissioners with the flexibility to consider higher buildings than we currently allow. It doesn't mean they have to approve them. It doesn't mean that they can't set specific criteria for approving them. It just means that they consider them.
As planners, don't you think we ought to advise them on what we think are the criteria?
I don't understand.
As in the advice on, we heard a testimony and Bill had some about special exceptions. Do you see that as a way to offer those conditions?
I find the special exception process benefiting a very small population of people and being applied on a spot-by-spot basis, which is a very different process.
So you don't think the fact that we had testimony that this will only affect really 3 properties of any substantial size, you don't consider that spot development?
It's all concentrated in an area that was specifically set aside for development by this planning department.
Yeah, at 45 feet, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but there are a lot of things that weren't considered in 2007 that have changed since then, like the need to put in access to the internet, the need to bury cable, a whole bunch of things. The world doesn't stand still. As James Saunders said last meeting, you know, what we need to be is keeping up with the times. And as it turns out, the times have changed the nature of warehouse building. Okay, it's a reality, it's a fact.
So you don't think that, like, offering conditions would be appropriate?
I think those conditions will come into play in terms of individual applications and what whoever the developer is proposing, and that's the normal process.
Not if you have 70 feet by right with no change in setbacks. You haven't handled all that, the different nuances of that. That, if you were going to say the commissioners should have flexibility, we need to give them, they appointed us to give advice on planning. They look at their mission, and that economic development, your commission, has other issues. And I'm surprised they didn't consider tourism as the gateway to be concerned about possible screening of things like that. I'm surprised they didn't, you know.
I think that would be brought up in the context of individual applications, as rightly.
But you don't.
It would be.
You don't consider individual applications. The economic development doesn't consider.
No, but they certainly participate and they can give testimony, as all people can, and all departments of government here can.
So if a
Correct.
project comes up that someone affect tourism, you would come in and testify for it or against it?
Possibly. I mean, this is hypothetical, but possibly they might, if they felt a particular.
Is the commission.
Is the commission,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Okay. What are you thinking, Ray? I'm thinking, you're thinking, I'm thinking about it.
Tom, with just saying flat out no, I'm concerned with the stifling the perspective of new clients and new buildings moving forward in the future. That being said, my own personal belief would be if, for the commissioners, regarding the commissioners, is that if you did a special exception, would that give them more flexibility than just giving them a blanket okay on the height as it stands at the moment? Because at that point, they could look at it a case-by-case basis and have the flexibility to say yay or nay, and then if they said yay, at that point, we could bring new things into terms in terms of the landscaping, the size of the landscaping, and the barriers around that area. And also, at that point, you could do a case-by-case survey of the area based on traffic patterns, noise, and what have you. So that's about all I have about it.
Thank you. Paul, you got any thoughts?
Well, I guess I'd say I have about the same thoughts as Ray. Personally, I kind of like the idea, well, I'll back up a bit. First, I have to say I was probably supportive of the 60 feet. And I will say that because the world is changing. Larger, if we're looking at larger warehouses, and I'm trying to keep myself separate from looking at any individual project. I mean, what we're looking at is 60 feet here. And at first I thought I guess I'd have to say I was totally in approval of the 60 feet, but the more I think about it, I have to be honest, I still think 60 feet might be attainable for certain projects, but I think definitely we should have we need to come up with a way to control that last 15 feet and come up with a special variance, come up with special conditions, and it allows us and gives us more power to look at those conditions. I think the buildings, we're facing a new future. These buildings are going to have facades on them and on their roofs. They're it's not only going to be storage area, but they're going to put things on our roofs that are going to support their building. You're going to have solar panels. You're going to have, various other things on the roofs that if you were to put them on a 45-foot building, really kind of restricts what they can do inside. So it just gives us a chance to look at what they are trying to do and what they're trying, and where they're trying to go with the building. And it just, I think the special exception would give us more control over that and give everybody a chance to see, and also give the builder a chance to explain why they need the 60 feet. So I think I would support telling the commissioners and that we would be willing to at least look at the 60, look at it. I don't want to say allow because it's not by right, but we would certainly be able to look at and give them some kind of special exception. And if they meet what the community and what the planning board and, allows and is in approval of. Because, we have to take care of our county, we got to take care of our people, but at the same time, we got to be able to have some reason, we have to have a way to go forward also. I mean, we're all realistic. We know things are going to change. They're going to change as we go down the road, and I think it was said, it's tough, once changed, it's tough to change it back. So let's put some flexibility in it and see what comes out of it.
Before we take a vote, I have a question for legal counsel. We have a current fixed 45-foot height limit in the zoning ordinance. Does this recommendation of Mr. Ruiz and Ray's require adoption of a specific additional section in the ordinance, much the same as Chestertown has adopted, to give the county commissioners flexibility to go up to 60 feet? No, but if it were adopted, would that be required?
If the recommendation would be for a special exception, yeah, there would have to be a whole new proposed text amendment specific to probably industrial zone, employment center properties. It could be, they could be more creative than that, but yeah, it would be a new zoning text amendment.
So additional work would have to be done to do that, correct?
It would be a whole new proposal.
Okay.
We have, the ordinance right now has a special exception for height throughout the whole county. So, I mean, it wouldn't matter whether right now the ordinance says that you can come in here for a special exception for height anywhere in the county, in any zoning district.
Where does it say that?
It's in the special exception section of the ordinance.
Is it, Bill?
Right there in special exceptions, it's got height on it, Carl. Height, bulk.
Those are categories. There's not a specific application.
But I mean, you can ask for a special exception for height.
Does it have a maximum it will stop at in there?
Variances you can ask for.
Variances, yes, but special exceptions are kind of specific uses.
Why is height in there then?
Well, I think you're confusing a variance with a special exception.
You can ask for a variance. It's still, you meet those requirements.
But we can certainly craft language to do that. That wouldn't be an issue.
What we have one decision to make is a favorable or unfavorable recommendation of the commissioners. They deserve that. Usually when we do that, whatever, if it were unfavorable, that we do make recommendations. And I think we've heard testimony. The thing that I think, this is about height only in this text amendment, but with a special exception, what troubles the general public is not knowing the use, and that would be codified with a special exception. And my background on this planning commission, we grant just about every special exception that comes through because the public is comfortable that they have conditions. That's why. By right, 60 feet bothers me because we haven't addressed the further elements. They've come up today about the impact. When you go higher, you got more space, and we don't have a plan. So I think I would recommend that I would recommend we look unfavorably upon the request and recommend staff investigating a special exception that would allow for 60 feet with conditions of use, setbacks, screening, things like that.
Does it have to be limited to 60 feet? I mean,
No,
it
could be,
more
yeah,
than that.
could be.
I mean, if somebody wants to do one out and you're 500 feet off the road or something, that's a different,
Mm-hmm.
whole different ballgame than 100 feet off the road.
Plus, moving forward, that eliminates the future.
Future,
growth.
good point, yeah. Staff, before we move on, do we have any more comments for you about the thought of a special exception for some of us? I'm not saying that's what we'll do, but if the recommendation is made.
My only thought on that is obviously, it's your role to recommend what you think is the right answer. Certainly, language can be formulated to do any of the things that you are discussing for. That's certainly not an issue. I would, in response to how that might be handled, that it is possible that could be handled as an amendment to the proposed legislation. Not sure how that would be handled, at the next level above us. So I'm sort of open to different options. I'd probably want to talk about that. But regardless, I understand that you all want to make a recommendation to county commissioners, and you recommend what you think is right. I do want to add a little clarification because there's been some things said. Because it reflects on me personally, I'm not proposing a 22 square mile development area. The Route 301 corridor was a study performed in 2007. The larger area was to draw demographics and infrastructure studies to study, and then a proposal was made, and the rezonings that include economic or employment center, industrial, and commercial, which are fairly limited areas. That's where the growth was proposed. So I'm not making a proposal for the Route 301 corridor. That's existed. It's been on the books since 2007. And that was what I wanted to say. So, and I'm seeing, did you want to discuss what I said earlier? Yeah, no, okay, all righty. I didn't want to presume that a new ZTA would be absolutely needed, so.
Well, I think probably the county attorney would want to weigh in on.
Yes, ma'am. Right, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Bill, you
Yeah.
put a lot of work in this, and it has been helpful.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Since you didn't have anything to do with it.
Thank you, Bill. Cindy, there was testimony about, and I know this is, and I don't even presume to play lawyer, but we talked about impacting one developer. Does that have any is that, in general, is that a legal issue? Meaning the benefit for the public need is for one person, one developer. Is that something that we consider? Or is that a state law, state regulation that considered?
Well, I think a reason why you may be asking that question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because, like a lot of people have said here, is, it's close in time. This proposal for a zoning text amendment is close in time to an actual application.
Mhm.
It's been before the planning commission for a parcel within that corridor, which you've already heard about. So, but this zoning text amendment isn't applicable.
Right, yeah.
So,
Well, there was testimony, about, Luke, that the only available one is that, is that something that we even consider? Or is that something that is in the, state law? There was a reference to a state law, and I know nothing about it, so,
you mean the special law
yeah.
reference?
Mhm.
Well, this isn't necessarily specific to, this zoning text amendment isn't specific to a particular parcel. I think some people could opine that that's perhaps why the county commissioners initiated it. But whether zoning text amendment, if adopted, is determined to be a special law would be a judicial
Okay.
determination.
Okay.
And there are cases So I'm not opining on whether this zoning text amendment is a special law or not.
Okay, that's what I didn't know, if that's something that comes into
And-
our level of review here or not. But
Certainly, the planning commission shouldn't consider what the public says may or may not be the law.
I know, that's what I'm asking, that's what I'm asking you, Cindy,
Yeah, yeah.
you're the lawyer. I didn't know if we even had to consider, that's whether it's because we're not, we're lay people and,
Right.
whether we have to consider that.
But this proposal is for an entire zoning district, not just one parcel, and several. So there's employment center, industrial, so it's not specific to one property.
Okay. Good.
As I see, and as far as the public need, it's a consideration for you all whether you recommend, whether you propose a favorable or unfavorable recommendation.
Okay.
I can just read from the zoning ordinance there. Where is it? When reviewing an amendment to the zoning map, the planning commission shall address the suitability of the property in question for the uses permitted under the proposed zoning, and the planning commission shall not recommend the adoption of the amendment unless it finds that the adoption of the amendment is in the public interest and not solely for the interest of the applicant. Well, in this case, there's not an application here. It's a legislative initiative to amend the zoning ordinance. And there are issues with the amendment, I'll go ahead and say this now, with the amendment section of the zoning ordinance where it's not clear when they're talking about a text amendment or a map amendment. So that may be something to consider as part of the overall comprehensive rezoning down the line.
Just add that in, Bill.
To the
Maybe you
list.
already have got it. Thank you. Well, we're up here, we need to send a recommendation to the county commissioners. I think we have talked enough and heard testimony from all parties.
I'm sorry, and
No.
public need is in part A, public need for the proposed amendment, and that is not specific to a map.
Okay.
Section 4A of, section 6(4)A of Article 12.
I'd have to look on it. No one interested in making a motion for one or favorable, unfavorable?
They'll make some money, we're happy.
Well, that's not our job, it's just to send a recommendation. County commissioners, we need to give them what we think, and they've heard the public, they will hear the public testimony, but, whatever, if we have ideas that could benefit their decision-making and help further the cause of economic development. But
I move that we vote to approve the requested text amendment as recommended by staff.
we have a motion, we have a second?
Do you, are you going to address the public need or whether the amendment complies with or deviates with the comprehensive plan?
I can certainly do that. I'm making this recommendation because it's entirely consistent with the comprehensive plan and fulfilling the county's commitment to pursuing goal number 2 for land use. I'm also recommending it because it's a request from the commissioners who have obviously considered public need in requesting the text amendment, and I'm requesting approval or recommending approval because it's consistent with the current evolution of requirements for different structures that are contemplated for the industrial employment center and commercial zones that have been identified and concentrated along the Route 301 corridor.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Hearing none, the motion fails. If we do not act on it, what's the commissioners it goes to without, it just goes to them by, with no rec? Okay.
Well, I'll make a recommendation that we send an unfavorable, I'll make a motion that we send an unfavorable recommendation to the county commissioners, proposed text amendment, that we do find that the proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan and Maryland critical area law. It's not as for a map amendment, but that we don't find that it meets the public need for the proposed text amendment. We feel that the gains to society or the public, in this case Kent County, do not significantly outweigh any detriments to the public of Kent County. But I move that we send an unfavorable recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
And your motion would be, where does this tweak it and break between the two motions?
Well, I think, that I can add on it that we recommend that they put in for a zoning amendment to allow for a special exception for height in the industrial and commercial. And what was the other zone?
EC, I think.
Employment center. I'll add that to it.
Okay, the motion's been amended. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Okay, ready, second. Any discussion?
Could you read the motion
Okay.
as presented, please?
You want me to say it again?
Yeah, say it again.
I move that we send an unfavorable recommendation to the county commissioners for the proposed zoning text amendment, that we do find that it meets the Kent County Comprehensive Plan and Critical Area Law, but that it falls short on the public need requirement, that we feel that the gains to the public in Kent County are significantly outweighed by the reasonable foreseeable detriments. We would recommend that the county commissioners introduce a amendment to the zoning ordinance that allows for a special exception for heights in the industrial, the commercial, and the employment center zoning districts.
Okay, we have a motion?
Do-
Wait. Oh, we had a second, I'm sorry. You were just asking to have it reread. Okay.
Right, do we have a second?
Yep, it's already second.
Okay, so.
We can't amend it unless you're going to
Well,
start.
we're in
it.
the discussion stage of the.
Right.
If I remember my Robert's rules.
You got it right.
Do we want to limit it to 60 feet, or do we want to go to the whole thing? Because
just
the
put
60
height
is what they're
requirement.
asking. If you go to height, then we're going to open it up, I'm afraid, to a lot more things than we want to get into. I would rather, they're asking for 60 feet. What we're recommending is, okay, you can go up to 60 feet, but with special exception. So I'd like to cap it at 60 within that proposal.
Well, okay, we have to vote on this one.
We can't tell the county commissioners what they can and can't put in their proposed legislation.
Well, they can do whatever they want.
That's,
We're just recommending.
yeah, we're just
We're
recommending.
just recommending, right.
I personally don't have something higher. Like I say, if someone's 1,000 feet off of a road, and want to go 80 feet, 90 feet, I mean, as long as, you know, that's a big difference than being 100 feet off the road. You may have breweries that come in here that have cooling towers that have to be significantly higher than 60 feet, you know?
That's not a building.
It's a structure.
Well, it would be with a brewery, yeah, you're right. Having seen it.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Respond yea or nay. Ray?
Yay.
Paul?
Yeah.
Bill?
Yes.
Vote two bills, yes. Paula?
Nay.
Nay. And I'll vote with the affirmative. So we'll send an unfavorable recommendation to the Kent County Commissioners with those conditions that we hope they consider in changing, adding another text amendment for that. Thank you. Got it? All right. That's our next item. Staff reports.
Why don't we take a 2-minute break and let them clear?
Oh, okay. And if anyone wants to take a break, I hope we're not too much longer, but maybe, I don't know. Bill may have a big report. You okay?
Just want to let them give us a chance to
Yeah.
let them get out.
Now, we're next is staff reports, which you're welcome to stay, Bill, if you want.
Okay, thanks.
Sometimes they're entertaining even.
It's really something.
It's not big too.
What's that?
Big jump.
Wait there. Carly, you want to come to the table? You don't have to interrupt them, but I feel lonely over there.
I guess we're good.
We are taking a break? No, I'm sorry.
We're on.
Sorry, but
That's okay. I apologize. I thought we were on break.
It wasn't on the agenda, so it wasn't allowed.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to report. I was obviously very focused on what you have before you. I continue to work through various issues in the land use ordinance to move towards legislation. I know there's been we just have a lot of items. There's been an enormous amount of interest. There's been a lot of building permit applications, a lot of requests. People have an interest in opening new kinds of businesses, so we've had to do a lot of sort of special research on things. So, and the Morgneck Solar project, they're working their way towards coming to you at some point. So have they been to TAC or they're scheduled for TAC? Scheduled for TAC.
that's
okay.
for just the site plan then?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So that's a very large project. So we'll have a lot to do on that. Okay.
Okay.
All righty. Okay.
You know, Bill, we hate to put all this on you. We know you got a lot to do, and I agree, it's not like it was 10 years ago. What comes is nothing little, and it's not straightforward. It looks to me like it all needs some sort of help somewheres. And it's not our grandfather's site plan anymore, you know, and
That's very correct, yeah.
it's,
I know you see it from the other side of the counter,
and,
yeah.
you know, like if you have something in the critical areas, they think they're gonna get this tomorrow. They don't realize
Yeah.
the process, you know, so it's, I don't know how you do it with the staff you have, really, honestly, and then fool them with all the crap that comes down from the state that you have to go for, you know, and you gotta spend $12,000 to get a $2,000 grant.
Yeah. Well, it is a wonderful team. I have been doing this for almost 30 years, and the team we have is spectacular. I mean, everybody helps everyone out. We touch base lots of times. We float ideas. There's a lot of collaboration, and I think our council's wonderful. It's an honor to work here. It's really, everything's working. I really hope everyone stays. So,
Have you got Campbell a business card yet?
you know, I've offered it. So, that's a little pressure there.
We always said if you don't get business cards, you're not here for long.
Oh, that gives me more incentive to make sure everyone gets one. Yeah, okay.
Bill, what
Thanks.
people have asked me, or not recently, but before, the timing on if someone wants to request a zoning change. Do they put those in any time to you?
So this is like a map amendment?
Map
Right.
change.
Yeah, it's still open. We're gonna, my plan is we're gonna send out one more notice with the tax bill just to give everybody one more shot.
Okay.
I don't think we have even 20
Yeah.
total, so, but yeah, so that can come in. There's a form that they can fill out if they want to. They could just do it by email or letter. In general, we're probably gonna circle back with them and sort of ask folks if they can provide some sort of narrative or reason, right? Not just I want to go from V to IV, some way that gives you all information to evaluate, so.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty.
Mark, do you have anything for us? Good. I wasn't asking about how your behavior, Mark. I just said you need information. I know you're good, but. Carla, do you have anything for us?
I do not have a staff report.
Bill, as the one citizen out there, do you want to say anything besides how wonderful Galena is?
Around football is a Chicken Little comment again. Very interesting meeting. Thank you, Joe.
All right. Cindy, anything for,
Yeah, I'm not technically staff, so I think that's been the tradition, but, yeah.
well, anything you can
I don't
offer?
have a staff.
Yeah. No, I know you did. I just wondered if you wanted to offer anything.
But as always, if there's.
Anyone have anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I do for a
Yeah,
minute.
okay.
You know, I'd like to see, going forward, that we don't have concept and preliminary approval at the same time. I really think we need to look at the concept plan, make our comments on that, and let them address that at preliminary plan. And, it just seems like once we give them preliminary approval, we're pretty well locked in on final approval. And I think that if we could make our comments, let them address that and come back, much like the one today, I mean, we're approving, we didn't have state highway approval, we didn't have a landscape plan. Got a site plan. I've never seen a site plan with no distances on it. I mean, all we could do was scale, and by a reduced scale. I think they need to have that, especially on the entrances. And my problem is, the road ordinance says it gotta be 750 feet in between the center lines. We don't know what they are in between them. And if they're not, I mean, you meet the ordinance or you ask for a variance on that or something. But I just think that when we're looking at concept and preliminary, we even have them come in here and want concept, preliminary, and final all on the same one. And that may be okay on a simple one, but something that's somewhat complicated or right out on the main highway or something, I think we need to do that a little differently.
Good point. Go ahead.
I think I'd like to agree with Bill.
No.
Well, maybe not always, but this time. When we get the concept and then you go to preliminary, that's just kind of putting the site together. When we do a final, my feeling on a final is everything's got to be there. You got to have the highway approval. It's got to be there, not, oh, well, we'll get it and we'll give it to the planning department. No, that's not a final approval. Final approval is final. Everything that's in there, already exists. You know, the highway approval, any kind of land conservation approvals, anything that they've got to have, all has to exist and should all be in front of us before we give a final approval. Or they should have a god-darn good reason not to.
Well, usually with the bonding issue, because they don't want to jump ahead and do it.
Well, I can understand with the bond.
And
right,
depending on staffing it from the state, the Kent Soil District, you know, sometimes those reviews are delayed, but usually if there's a problem, you guys know about it before anyway, if it's.
But in some of that stuff, if it's delayed, unfortunately, it's delayed. I mean, I'm not trying to.
Well, it's not
lengthen-
delayed by this staff, is what I'm saying. It's delayed
Yeah.
by other agencies.
By other agencies, that's true, but I think what we should be finalizing as a final approval should be that plan, you know, with all the approvals intact. Not, well, we're going to get it, we'll get this, we'll get that. Because now, who oversees whether they met the final approval?
The staff does.
Well, the staff does, but I just would like to have that whole approval. That's just me, but I would like to see the
It's
whole
good you come
plan
here
in
with
front of me.
everything Ready to go.
Yep.
Are you open to discussion on this?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I certainly understand how you feel about that and the cleanness of that. You know, for a lot of folks, they're in complicated deals, they need to show progress, they need to show milestones. You know, there is the check that, you know, we don't sign off on any plans until everything is lined up. And essentially, for things that don't affect the plan itself, in other words, you approve a set of drawings, and those set of drawings don't change, but there's some ancillary piece of information from an engineer or reviewer or an agency that confirms the plan, those are generally the kinds of things that can be conditions that you can approve, right? The plan itself doesn't really change, but there's supplementary things that change. I know in one case we talked about, you know, the landscaping, it's making it be real out in the field, et cetera. So if you might be willing to consider that, because sometimes some of those things are hard to line up. God bless, yeah. And, you know, they're dependent on other agencies to make reviews and approvals, and that takes time. So again, if it were something that were actually going to change the documents, I don't think we would be comfortable approving that, so. But that's just, is that a fair way you think to represent it?
I think that particularly for today's case, that was the situation, that we felt the few things that were still outstanding weren't going to substantively change what you were approving, and that if we felt there had been something that would have made a difference, we would have told them to not come forward, so.
And if you don't want to merge any sets of plans, you want concept, preliminary and final separate, that's fine. I would just ask is if we can think a little bit about things like minor additions to commercial properties. I mean, there's times when you need a site plan to work something out, but the actual big picture issues are relatively minor, you know.
I think you would say, I mean, I appreciate the comments from Paul and Bill, but we trust your judgment. I think the difference is, I think the ones that is this traffic studies, because those are getting big, and if what happens in Millington by right now, I think will be a big issue, and, you know, even to the wealthy people in the northern part of the county, up in Galena, but,
So we'll default to the 3 steps, and maybe we can sort of touch base.
I
when some
trust
things
your
come up.
judgment when you know it's more, you know, but a traffic one, that one's kind of bothered me the most. I know the other project we gave preliminary, that traffic issue is major.
Right.
So I worry about Carla on that road, the speed she goes down there.
And to just give some perspective, I mean, all of you involved in this, you know, for folks who are the applicants, if they're coming in and they sort of expected, I'm going to get a building permit and, you know, make an addition to the back of my building, and they have to go through 3 months of site plan review, you know, with 3 different meetings before they can even get a permit, that is often frustrating for folks. So that's part of the reason we're trying to balance that. And I agree with you, and it's complicated. Yeah, of course, we always want your all's input, yeah.
You see them come through here and want to be fast-tracked, and 6 months later, they haven't put a shovel in the ground.
Yeah.
Well, I think
I know
that's
that
the
too.
exception to the rule. I think people want to
Yeah.
see expeditious processing, and the more steps you put in, when we have a very experienced and very knowledgeable staff that we're relying on to make recommendations or not recommend, as the case may be, depending on their in-depth evaluation of the particulars of a project, I don't see why we need to extend the process, particularly if we're interested in economic development and residential development in this county. Because otherwise, you know, it comes back to the Kent County reputation that Ray cited the other
But
day.
it's only fostered by people on these committees and commissioners saying that.
Well, I think it's a function of actual experience, but
You think this is
My
Kent County? You believe this is Kent County?
I've been here for 33 years, and I do.
I can remember them wanting to put up a cell phone tower, took them forever to get a permit.
Right, because I fought them.
There you go.
I mean, people question, and now it's obsolete because of 5G and cable. And so the cell phone tower that went up over the historic district of Still Pond, that I fought for that reason, because it did impact the view shed in that area.
So we're in 60 feet too.
And is higher than 60 feet, yes. And, you know, I've been questioned about my commitment to preservation. I've been here for 33 years. I have a house on the National Register that I've spent all this time repairing and changing. I was instrumental. I was one of the principals in getting the Historic District designation for Still Pond, documenting that with the SHA for the Maryland Historic District Commission. I am a tree steward, so I'm planting trees all
I'd hate
over
to be on the Economic Development Commission and be calling Kent County. That doesn't seem like a good slogan to start.
Well, I think that's the concern on that
If you
commission.
keep repeating it, I think that's the, perception becomes reality, people that present that. It's quite a shame.
Harlan?
I just wanted to ask for sort of a clarification of your concern over doing concept and preliminary together. Is it just, I kind of agree with you that I think that concept needs to be on its own, but I guess I'm wondering, do you want the three-step process, or if staff determines that it's acceptable to do preliminary and final together?
I think, maybe that's your call, but I give you the two for Gillespie and Sons. I think that needed a concept approval and our comments on that, and then see if they wanted to address them, because now we've given them preliminary, and it's gonna be tough to change some of the things. I mean, you ride by there and suddenly we're talking about,
You're talking about the Morgan Neck Road one, or Brickyard today, we just gave final.
I know, but we give them preliminary and concept to the one
We
out
did.
by Campbell
Yep.
Soup. And it's gonna be a little tough to change some of, that's a bigger project out there than it looked like on paper.
But would that just really go for commercial, you're thinking, or residential as well?
I don't see where we had the Easter Seal Camp, that was fine. I mean, my goodness, I don't even, that almost seemed like a waste of time, but some of them are pretty detailed,
Well, I think kind of having your opinion will help us dealing with applicants.
I think they can come up here and we can give them concept and not give them
You
preliminary.
certainly can. You
so.
do have that right to make that choice. If
But I
they've
think-
requested concept and preliminary, you can certainly say, we're only going to give you concept review. You don't
that's
have to
But
do
it
what
would
they
be
ask.
helpful to us not to have to slap them
Understand.
down when at least you could acknowledge, this could be tough. You may have, you may see that they want some more information, but.
And I think it also has been tough for us at times when we have applicants who come and say, this is what we want to do. And we certainly don't want to try to hold back projects, but I think if we know that how you feel, and if we're kind of in that same feeling of, well, maybe this really should be a concept before preliminary, I think we now have a little more weight to kind of have that conversation with applicants. So I do appreciate that.
Time to look at it too,
Yeah.
And I mean, for us, this is a partnership, we serve you, and we want to bring you what is approval. This conversation is helpful because then we can convey to applicants, this is how the planning commission feels about it. So, I mean, I appreciate that, A lot of times in other settings, people will say, oh, well, how do you think the Board of Appeals are gonna vote? And I'm like, I'm not gonna prognosticate, I don't know. They consider each one individually, and right, those are those are quasi judicial cases. There's no, but understanding your all's will for how you'd like things done and what you'd like to see, we can convey that to applicants and say, they would prefer the 3 steps. So, and then applicants can, make an argument otherwise if they want to. And I think a lot of the applicants' representatives are trying to help applicants compress time and those kind of things.
Oh, yeah, I understand that the applicant
There's a
wants
lot
it,
of
and it's
asks,
just,
yeah.
I just, like I say, that road thing just.
And I'm not looking to slow them all down, but at the same time, I have a problem, as you well know, I've mentioned several times, I like to do a site visit, I like, there's different things. And if you go from preliminary to final in one jump,
Yep.
it's, I guess I'd have to say, I don't get the opportunity to go look at it and I'll be particular to myself, I don't get a chance to put my own thoughts into it. I mean, you, from preliminary to final, you've already set the road for them. We don't get the opportunity to maybe represent the community in what maybe they would like to, what could be done with that property. And there may be other ideas that we have that the applicant hasn't thought of.
And since we're in the middle of a comprehensive rezoning and rewriting a certain code, I'd like to ask this question, and I definitely would love to have Cindy's opinion on this. In other places, I have had people come for what I called an informal meeting. So under comments, like now, at the end of a meeting, an applicant could come and they could make an informal presentation. They would say, hey, these are the things we're thinking about. The board wouldn't respond directly to their presentation, but the board could say, well, in things like landscaping, we like native plantings, and we want no irrigation, and we like xeriscape, and we like buildings with multiple colors. And so when you put together your proposal, these are the kind of things we value that might help you. So, and the idea was, on the one side, applicants were able to sort of give a preview of what they were thinking about without a direct response, and the commission was able to give a sort of list of their principles of things they like to see. I don't know if you want to consider that, but it made applicants feel a lot more comfortable, because you got to make a lot of investment, even conceptual plan level, and you have no idea how a board might respond. So it was a way of kind of airing both sides without really interaction, but everybody at least got an idea of what was important to the board, and the board got an idea of what's coming down the track, and things could kind of evolve.
The informal meeting stuff, though, because you're subject to the open meetings law, so.
Well, I mean, it's.
Here right now, they could come in at the end and just ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Bill could ask, he's probably looking to put up a Texas Roadhouse in Galena or something.
In essence, so that's a concept meeting, so it's.
Well, they really, a lot of times, I mean, sometimes they would have nothing, and sometimes it would just be a sketch, like, when you trying to sell a
You're just discussing
project.
concepts, you're just
Right.
discussing what could be.
Right, they're not meeting, it's not really a submittal, it's just a,
But there's no approvals given, there's no motions made, there's nothing.
and there's actually no direct, there's not direct comments on what's being seen, it's just talk about, these are our principles. Hey, you happen to be talking about an industrial building. Our principles for industrial buildings like this is what we value. So, but again, I mean, we could think about it, but I have done that in other places, and it was sort of helpful to lower the tensions for both applicants and the board, because it just meant there was a whole lot less surprises. And they had a 3-step process as well, so, anyway, since we're talking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Hold on, Bill's got
Oh,
something.
sorry. Yep, don't,
Come on,
Don't-
you can walk and talk.
we
at
got
the same
plenty of time, Bill.
No, you don't have to come up all the way.
Just stand over there, Bill, we're good, we're good.
This task force concept. Okay. Right here. I thought maybe we ought to put our concept in this group, but having said all that, I didn't know commissioners. Let's see, commissioners don't have a mission statement, right? And we could have a mission statement and tie some of these things you've just been talking about into it. More work.
Before the meeting, Mr. Sutton had suggested to me, would it be possible for this body to develop a mission statement, similar to the way the task force did. And if you remember, for a lot of the task force meetings at the beginning, the mission statement was on the top of the agenda. Sometimes it was red. There were ground rules that I think Mr. Sutton was just reminding me that those kind of steps were helpful to inform the public about why we're here and what we're doing. So if there's an interest in that, we can certainly do maybe a meeting with less items, like a work session, like we did with the task force, and come up with a mission statement that you all like. We can start with the task force mission statement, although that was very specific to a job. But if you all want to have some introductory statement on your agenda that shows up every single time that talks about why we're here and what you value and what you're doing, we can certainly do that. We've got the tools. So I thought it was a good idea. Because it did help a lot at the task force, because, oftentimes Chair would read the ground rules and read them, and it kind of helped the audience understand what's happening. So, yeah. Thank you. That was a good suggestion. Yeah.
Okay, but Cindy's got something maybe.
Obviously, it would depend entirely on what the mission statement said, but yeah, definitely just want to think about whether it created some other
Here, I'll back you up.
consideration.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad Cindy mentioned in a memo about the sign-up sheet, and I thought the quorum was a little better today, where people, get up, say, and sit down, and we don't have the back and forth on that side of the rail. Everyone, I think, we didn't limit it, and everyone, we heard a lot of the same things, but it went along a little faster than because people that jump up, go, what? So that was, I appreciate Campbell taking care. You ought to get business cards, Campbell.
It also helps afterwards to have the names, because sometimes it's hard to catch.
It could too,
It's
yeah.
a great idea, yeah. Okay.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. I'll see you.
You didn't take my
Need
copy
Rod
of this,
Day?
did you? There was a single sheet that